This gentleman come in. All right. We call the meeting of the Halfmoon Township Board of Supervisors to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. This meeting is being recorded live on CNET's YouTube channel. First up is going to be citizens' comments. For anything that is not on the agenda is going to be limited to 3 minutes. So, does anybody wish to speak about anything on the agenda, or, excuse me, not on the agenda? Yes, sir, in the back. Please come up, state your name.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cliff Neal. I am the medical director for Port Matilda EMS. I'm also the medical director for 5 other regional EMS agencies, and I used to be the State Department of Health regional medical director for 9 counties. So I've got a pretty good grasp on EMS, and I realize that was not on the agenda tonight. I just want to be very, very clear that we are in not only a crisis, but it's a crisis that has to be managed immediately, meaning that if we go to January 31st and we have not received support of all the townships in the area, the doors on Port Matilda EMS are indeed going to close and they're not going to reopen. And I know a lot of people have talked about maybe other agencies coming in and covering the need, and I can tell you that's probably far from the truth. I cover most of those agencies that everybody brings up as a name or two, and it's not important to mention them by name. But I can tell you that the cost of bringing in an outside agency to fulfill that role is probably going to be far higher than the cost we currently have for the EMS agency sitting over in Port Matilda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment person.
My name is Karen Miller, and I've been a citizen of Halfmoon Township for 25 years. And I started attending these meetings about a year ago. And during the time that I've been attending these meetings, I've gotten the impression from this board that we're in dire straits, that we have no money, that the township doesn't have any money, and we can't fund, because we don't have any money, we can't fund the EMS and the Port Matilda Fire Company. I know we took away the fire companies, the 1.7 mil tax that was dedicated for the fire company. I have got some data, and Port Matilda, or excuse me, Halfmoon Township has the highest wealth of all the 5 groups that are in the Upper Bald Eagle Township, or COG, that are supporting EMS and the Port Matilda Fire Company. We have the lowest poverty rate. We have the highest medium income. We have the most people. And again, our medium income rate is pretty much double or more than double of all of the other people in the that are in this COG supporting the fire company and the EMS. And I was here for the budget meeting too, when you were spent $134,000 to buy a backhoe, $280,000 to pay off a low-interest loan for Automena Park. And I know that we have $299,000 in ARPA funds that has not been used for anything. And we have roughly, by the time you pay all of these loans that for a backhoe and the lease on the truck that you're purchasing, you still have in approximately $300,000 left over. So if you add that $300,000 to the $299,000, that's over $500,000 that you have available. And again, these other townships, their median incomes are like 38,000 or 40,000 or 42,000, and ours is 98. And again, this came from Center County Planning Development Office. I think if you actually talked and did a survey of the citizens of Halfmoon Township, I think they would be happy to pay for taxes to keep their EMS services operating and their fire department operating. I know that I've been here for 25 years and I've used the EMS services 4 times. I hope I never have to use it again, but I doubt that that's going to be the truth. I'm sure we'll have to use it more because we're getting older. And we've used the fire department once. They've had to come and put out a chimney fire in our house. So I am extremely concerned about losing those services. And we have the money. Now, Ron has said multiple times that, everybody else should be paying. These other townships that have half the income that our township citizens have, you want them to pay more. Their poverty rates are high, okay, children, okay? And I'm sorry, I think the wealth that we have in this community, if we can support the fire department and the EMS services for our citizens. And if we help our neighbors' citizens, the other people that live around us that have far less than we have, I'm fine with that. Maybe you should be taking surveys of the citizens, all of the citizens that live here in Halfmoon Township, and find out how they feel about EMS services and fire department service. Yes, I have spoken above my 3 minutes, Ron. And I also add, too, that I think if you take a survey of the citizens of Halfmoon Township, they want to remain in the library, too. Thank you.
Next individual.
My name is Donna Hughes, and I live on the Marengo Road. I asked Amy to make a copy and give you all a copy of some statistics that we pulled together, and we have a whole lot more to come. I'll just say that. And I'm not going to go over a lot. I'm just going to say one thing, and that is, even though we are by far the wealthiest township, we are second to the bottom in support for EMS. Second to the bottom. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Virginia, House for Handlers.
Well,
Hi, my name is Virginia Squire, and I've lived in the township for 24 years. The day that we moved to our farm, Paul Brown suddenly appeared and helped us unload our truck. He brought us dinner, and this was despite the fact that we had never met him before. That's one of the many things that I love about living in our township, the feeling of community. I know my neighbors, and I know they will help me if I need it. And I know they can count on my help if they need it. We don't agree on everything, but we don't have to. Indeed, we celebrate our differences of opinion. In the definition of duties of supervisors for Pennsylvania, it says in part that the Board of Supervisors shall, quote, secure the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the township. Besides for supporting the fire department and the EMS services, I believe that libraries help the welfare of our citizens. Indeed, when Andrew Carnegie established public libraries first in Pennsylvania, he said that public libraries were to become instruments of change, necessities, important institutions as vital to the community as police, fire stations, and public schools. Supervisor Cervello, you have complained in recent meetings about other townships not supporting the fire department at the level that Halfmoon Township does. You said they weren't pulling their weight. If Halfmoon Township pulls out of supporting SCLO Library, we will be doing exactly what you're complaining about, making other municipalities carry our weight, and the impact will be felt across the entire center region. I'm aware that not everybody uses the library, but Halfmoon should be really proud that more than 67% of the households in Halfmoon Township have at least one library card. And I'm not talking about the cards issued by the school district. SCLO contributes to the general health and well-being of the entire region. During the pandemic, Because the internet at my house is so unstable, I had to teach my classes in the parking lot of SCLO. People in Half Moon use the library. To date, the bookmobile, which circulates materials provided by SCLO, has distributed over 1,000 items to township residents. During the same time, over 2,000 items have been circulated to residents at the pickup lockers at Way Fruit Farm. Both of these services make the library accessible to senior citizens, people with limited mobility, people who are trying to reduce their carbon footprint, and those on a fixed income. Please, our township surplus is over $300,000. We can support the library and the fire department and EMS because they are necessities vital to the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the township. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brooks, you're up.
I don't want to talk about it much, but I wanted to thank you for last time I was here. You let me talk for, I don't know, I asked questions for 20 minutes and it was great. I was really appreciative of that. And I think what's happened within the township and possibly the rest of the world is that we've lost our sense of civility. And I think we are no longer able to have discussions about anything. It just makes the divide deeper whenever. And I think it's time, it's almost as if we're looking for something to be angry about. I think it's time maybe for us to try something different. And I remember when Rob was on the Planning Commission, when there was an issue like, for example, the lighting ordinance and the sign ordinance specifically, they set up a committee to do the research. This committee did the research, then then they could report, and then they could report to the supervisors. So, and I'm just wondering if that wouldn't work with us, with you as supervisors. For example, the fire thing. There's a lot of information we don't know. And would it have been good for the supervisors to have a group on both sides, perhaps? Do the research and present it to you, and then you could make a informed decision about whatever the issue is. Okay? It'd be interesting if the community could decide to work together, if we could restore civility. And I'm just going to leave you with a couple of quotes. It's possible to disagree without being disagreeable. Civility is not a sign of weakness. And two more quotes from Reagan and Bush. There is no limit to the amount of good you can do if you don't care who gets the glory. And civility is the determined choice of trust over cynicism and community over chaos.
Okay, yep.
Deb, you can go ahead and make a comment.
I'm sorry, was that for me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Deb Nardone. I'm a resident of Halfmoon Township. I wanted to echo and support earlier comments that were made about fire and EMS. As a taxpayer and knowing the wealth that we do have here in Halfmoon Township, I do believe it's imperative that we're equitable and fair in paying our share for services that we all need. Though we might not need them ever, knowing that we have access and capacity to help ourselves and our neighbors is really important. I also wanted to weigh in on future discussion regarding the library. I don't think it was, I don't know if anyone else noticed that's on Zoom. When they joined, they were able to join via a link that was provided by the Library Center Foundation. That's just one of the services that allow residents like us to provide or to participate in township meetings when we can't be there in person. And so I don't believe that removing our support for the library is in the best interest of Halfmoon taxpayers. I don't believe it's in the best interest of our community. And particularly, it's not in support and in the best interest of those who really need it most. So I saw a lot of strange discussion going on in listservs today. I think there's definitely a small faction of people who want to defund the library because their values may not mirror those of some of the resources that are provided by the library. I really hope that we are having a valid and open discussion about the merits of the library and not trying to defund the library because of a small few people who believe that there are resources that shouldn't be made available to children. And so I guess I put this out there as, one, holding a public meeting about this issue on the 26th is a good choice on behalf of the township supervisors. I would think that you would want to be having good, solid conversation and engagement. So I highly recommend that we move that meeting to a time where people can actually participate. I do think if you poll the majority of your residents, they would show that there's strong support for both the library and funding fire and EMS. And I do think it's important that you ask your taxpayers, your residents, your constituents, what they truly want, and whether that's through public discussion, holding public meetings, places where people are welcome, like the fruit farm. It could even go to the point of asking people to vote through a referendum. There are lots of ways that you could be engaging your constituents and doing so with an open democratic dialogue. So thank you for my time. I really don't support pulling our funding from the library, and it definitely is not in the best interest of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, gentleman in the back. That must be you.
That must be me.
And with the Cornell shirt on.
That is true. So my name is Collins Arzicki. We've been here for about 5 years, so long-time listener, first-time caller, so very exciting. So we're not going to be available to be here for the special meeting on December 26th. We're visiting my elderly family members out of state. So I just wanted to make sure that I could come to this meeting and read some commentary from my family. So my family and I support SCLO and their activities. We consider a $19 per Halfmoon citizen contribution to be reasonable for an educated and engaged populace. I would also like to note, as the parent of 2 small children in the township, I was a little disheartened to have heard or read things, online akin to, I used to support the library when my children were little, but no longer, or I rarely or never use the library, why should I pay for it? For example, for those actuarially less likely to require EMS services, should they assert that older residents be taxed more? I don't personally think so. For those that live in the village, should they ask to eliminate the plow budget because they cannot use township roads? Also something that I would strongly disagree with. That said, I understand that such discussions are complex and many people have good faith opinions that I personally disagree with. And so I welcome public discourse. But what's most concerning to me is the manner that me, as someone who hasn't been attending a lot of these meetings in person, but does watch all of them on CNET. As an aside, CNET, as a parent of someone who has 2 small children running around, is like a godsend for kind of staying engaged. I wouldn't be able to really kind of stick with the meetings as much as possible. But I couldn't recall any direct discussion about the library contribution here in public in many months. I went back through the minutes, and thank you, Amy, for putting together the minutes. The last 2 mentions I have of SCLO are August 25th of the SCLO quarterly report, and then October 13th when a citizen comment discussed this. So if I'm able to ask a quick question in my couple minutes I have here, how does an ordinance, such as the one that's coming up on December 26th, end up on the agenda? Does a Board of Supervisors member put that on? And why is the meeting a special meeting and not the discussion not occurring? I mean, maybe these are really naive, stupid questions, but I was just curious. Yeah.
Because if it was at a regular meeting, we'd never be able to conduct regular business, because I assume there's gonna be a lot of people come to give testimony for and against the library.
Okay.
It's done by ordinance because when we signed up for the library in, I think, 2002, they forced us to adopt an ordinance to put it on the agenda. So my envision is that this discussion will be about eliminating the ordinance, not necessarily cutting funding for the library. But that we can discuss. So hopefully that helps.
I might clarify by saying the ordinance is a requirement in order to withdraw from a contract.
Okay.
Okay, that is the purpose of the ordinance, and the only purpose.
It's kind of a.
It does not address funding, it does not address participation, it does not address the library program, it addresses the contract as it's written.
Okay.
The Articles of Agreement, as they call it. It's a contract, but it's called the Articles of Agreement. Okay, nothing else in terms of funding, in terms of support, is being addressed with that.
Okay. If I could just ask one more quick question as to, was there some precipitating event that caused this to be scheduled for the last calendar week of the
The
year?
ordinance
or-
requires it. It
Okay.
says at the end of the year.
So we couldn't have voted on it in like October or November. It had to
Well, I
be.
suppose we could have, but it says at the end of the year in the contract that we have signed.
No, we have to let them know that we wanted to be out by the end of the year, so that we wouldn't have to pay for 2024. We could have handled this at any time, but it went to be put on the agenda the last week, the last meeting of the year, and then we found out that we had to do it by ordinance, so the only day, and then you have to have 5 days after the ordinance for it to be in effect. So in order for it to be in effect by the end of the year, the 26th was the only day. But yes, this could have been handled anytime during the year. And then our only requirement was to let them know by the end of the year. So if we don't let them know by the end of the year, then we're going to be responsible also for paying in 2024.
It carries over.
It ca-
Okay.
You have to give them a year notice.
Right.
But we will be supporting the library fully for 2023, no matter what. Even if I get hit by a truck tomorrow,
At
the money's
their-
still coming to the library for 2023.
Their
But that's already on.
their set amounts, because they determine the formula and they set the amounts.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate that, and I hope that the board takes my statement into as if I were here on December 26th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the audience? Please.
So I'm Donnie Instacovi, and I'm former principal. I've been a resident since 1990. Former principal of Park Forest Elementary, and I was head of school at State College Friends School. I'm concerned about the library, and I guess the wording, I'll skip, you have my letter, but literacy is an essential life skill. We all know that. Mm-hmm. And we want people to be good thinkers and think for themselves, not be controlled by anyone. So as a community member, I believe that we need to continue, and I understand it's not until 2024, but the statement that bothers me in the ordinance is the best interest of our township citizens to withdraw. And I don't know how that data was gathered to find that it's in the best interest of the community. So, and similar to what Becky was saying and Virginia was saying, bringing people together to talk about it would be a really good idea in order to collect the data that's necessary. Deb, I believe, also said that. There's things in libraries that people don't have. There's a lot of people that don't have internet, that don't have computers, that aren't accessible to IRS forms or books, and so libraries perform that. My mother used to have to go to the library to use the computer to do some of the things that she needed to do. One of the things I personally appreciate is that there are reading kits for book clubs. And so if I purchased a book every single time, it costs a lot of money. And right now, what my tax dollars amount to is one book per year instead of, we have 12 books per year in our library group. So I strongly support using funds so that we can continue to support SCLO as well as Center County Library Services. And, I just would like to see us get together and talk. So I think that's really important for us to do as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. I recognize that fireman.
What's that?
I said, I recognize that fireman.
My name is Brian Hoffman, and I'd like to start with a question. It's been 2 weeks, I think, since we last met, and I was wondering if you had any updates on the EMS or fire funding.
Well, I could just speak from my own personal thing. I've been in contact with the Jack Bonsall at the EMS. We are waiting for them to respond on a few things about what they're doing and how they're processing. I know that when the year's going to roll over here shortly, I will tell you that here again, I will do everything within my power to make sure fire and EMS are viable in this community, and especially Port Matilda, who has a long history with the township. Not to interrupt from your time, but maybe you could enlighten us a little bit if you care to, since you're a treasurer guy. What is happening with the foreign firemen's relief? Can you, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. I'm just asking since you're here. And I have heard all kind of crazy things, and I have not spoken with the firemen directly. I didn't know you were going to be here tonight, or I would have asked you ahead of time. But if you can enlighten us a little bit.
I can tell you what I know, and some of it is, I'll call it hearsay, because we have one of the members of the fire relief that attends our monthly fire hall or firemen's meeting or whatever you want to call it. So some of it is based on casual conversation from that. But the Firemen's Relief Association has, I'll call it, failed their past 2 audits for several reasons, one of which was failure to produce a copy of their bylaws and constitution. The informal discussion at our meeting was that had been taken care of. I talked to the Auditor General today and asked if they could confirm that, and if so, could we get copies of them? And I don't have an answer. They're supposed to get back to me. I did speak to somebody, but the person I spoke with couldn't answer the question. They provided a lot of other insight on the state of fire and EMS in our state, and none of it's pretty. So I do want to echo what Cliff was saying. This is not something that we can work on over 6 months. It's with the EMS. It's got to be now. Yeah, it's and I'm sorry. So does that answer your question sufficiently? About
It helps. At least I'm hearing it straight from somebody who's directly involved.
Yeah. So they do have money. I've heard numbers anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000, and that's all state funds. There are very specific things that they can spend that on, but it's a very long list. So it's not like there's only 2 or 3 things. Right. There's quite a few things. And granted, it has to be on that list for them to approve it, but there are things that could, be spent on. So,
Brian, I got a question. Do you know, yesterday there was supposed to be a meeting of the Firemen's Relief Association.
Which was
It was a
canceled,
public
correct.
meeting, it was canceled. I inquired as to why. I didn't get any response from anybody.
And I don't know either.
You have no idea?
Nope.
I think we need, and the purpose, I was going to attend because I wanted to find out what the problem was.
A lot of people were.
and it's canceled, and I sent an email to the chair or the president. I don't know if it's a chair or president of that association, but I didn't get a response. I copied John Witherite and the board and our administrative staff, but I have yet to see a response. I mean, it concerns me about why that isn't. It's a discussion between the fire company and the Firemen's Relief Association. I'm trying to figure out what's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of money sitting there that is not being issued, not being released.
That
So.
concerns me too.
Now, one other question with regard to that money: do they release the money for the fire company to make their purchases, or do they make the purchases?
They don't make any of the purchases that I'm aware of. They might get invoiced for them.
Okay.
So if we go to them and say, hey, we want to buy this, will you pay for it? And they say yes, then we have the invoice sent directly to them a lot of times.
Okay.
But I know recently, for example, a fireman's coat and jacket is expensive. I think it's like
Right.
$4,000 ballpark. They failed to pay for the last one we bought, so we had to pay for that out of our fundraising.
And it concerns me as to why that's happening. You know, and I hear things even in the meetings that I attend with Upper Bald Eagle Cog. When John's there, you know, we've had this discussion about why there's some deficiencies in the Auditor General's report regarding the inventory of equipment purchases and you know, whatever related documentation that goes with that. And yet the fire company keeps good records. They keep theirs on the computer. They present it, they provide information to the Firemen's Relief Association, and then it's somehow nobody knows what happened to it. So, I mean, we gotta get to the bottom of this. This is state money. It's passed through the township, and they do that for a reason. Because they want us to be accountable for that money, eventually, ultimately.
We can't give it to you directly, but if we could, we would, but.
They want
No,
oversight from us, and
Yep.
the thing is, if they're not willing to even talk to us, I don't know where we go from here. But we got to do something to get their attention, to get them in a room with us, so we can get to the bottom of the problem. I'm really concerned about that money. It's being held up, and you know we can't even find out what's happening, and neither can the fire company apparently.
Not yet. No, not yet. When I heard they had canceled that meeting, I just.
It's
kinda
hundreds of
like-
thousands of dollars we're talking about. I mean, it's a lot of money.
But my understanding, their current balance is somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000. So it's not insignificant.
No.
No.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
So anyway, did I answer all your questions too, or?
Yeah,
You know, so I just want to add to the urgency of this. And right now, the urgency is on the EMS. I think it's important not just to fund them, but to fund them in a predictable way so that they can hire people and say, your salary will be paid. You know, you have a solid job here and you're going to get benefits with a decent pay rate. Because if the EMS fails, the fire company may not be far behind. They're all volunteers. At least the EMS people get paid. I couldn't tell you how many hours I put in, and I don't have to go to fires. You know,
I would like to see what it is they need, and I think we're still a little premature there. Although we got to get that information and get it fairly quick, but EMS has to tell us what does that look like? How much is it? What it's for?
The figures are right, if you would like them, I can provide those for you.
if you can do that, that would be fantastic.
Somebody's got to do it because I mean, we
I think I believe Jack provided them to you already, but if you.
Well, we're also concerned.
I have
and-
this year's budget and expenditures to date. I do have that.
I know he provided 2022 because he gave it to me specifically what he provided to you folks.
Right.
That's kind of what we have to base our expenditures on, you know, looking into 2023. Clearly, everything is probably gonna cost more to some extent, especially if wages increase, which,
Well, that's one of the things that we're also concerned about. We don't know what a typical EMS wage should be. We have a general idea. But
I do, if I can
Well, I was
help
gonna
you.
say, if somebody from the ambulance or yourself
I can tell you what the
say, we need to
typical,
hire this many people and do this much stuff, and, you know, that would give the township something solid to hang our hat on and say, hey, you know, we can help you with this, or this is the goal where we need to be.
starting pay typically in this area is $15 an hour for an EMT, and that usually involves some type of benefits as well. Some of those are limited, some of those are pretty extensive. You can, if you're an EMT, you can go to any EMS agency in Pennsylvania right now and they will hire you in a moment because everybody is really hurting
We are
seriously.
short people, big time.
It's not just shortage people, it's shortage money, grossly. We've been underpaid for a long time,
Well, that's
and that's an issue,
that's
okay?
evident.
So if we brought up, we can run on 8 as a minimum, but we need about 10 people to cover if somebody got sick, which an example of that would be with COVID, when that went through. If we got an exposure and there was any protective issues, something like you weren't wearing safety goggles, and this happened to our service, you're out for 10 days at the time, okay? So you can't cover all the shifts for 10 days. So, you know, ideally, it would be good to have 10 people on staff.
I'm sorry, is that 10 full-time or a combination of full
It
and
would
part?
be a combination, but you'd have to have the equivalent of 10 full-time positions, I guess, is probably.
Okay, FTE 10.
Yeah,
10,
I think
okay.
if you figure it that way, you'd need 10 full-time position equivalents so that you can cover all these slots. But again, Port Matilda is not the only one in the area, not the only one in Pennsylvania, and unfortunately not the only one in the entire
We have to
country.
make it attractive to come to the Port Matilda EMS and be there.
And there are ways to do that,
Yeah.
because rural EMS agencies, unlike some of the larger ones with its paramedics, the EMTs actually get to provide more hands-on care than they do where there is a service where there are paramedics and they may be doing the majority of the care, and the EMTs aren't functioning at that high a level to make decisions.
Would you be interested in being involved at the next meeting if we have one with Jack and?
I'm behind the scenes, I'm already very much involved
Okay,
in all
well,
these
that's
meetings.
good, maybe you and I need to talk too.
Yes,
And
I
we
would
could,
be.
and we could start putting some stuff together, and I apologize, we're kind of getting off the citizen comment thing, but I think this is important, and.
Well, those figures, you said those figures aren't available, and they definitely are there,
Okay,
so.
if you have those, and I know Jack's very busy.
I know they're there.
Okay. Jack, he told me he provided you the same figures he gave me.
Well, he's been talking to Ron, so.
Okay, was that not accurate? Because I can email them to you, like right
As
now.
far as those figures, updated figures of what they need, how many people, what the rate should be, I don't have that information. I've been to the Upper Baldy Cogs, I've brought the meeting minutes, notes back. I have the 2022 information. If we're going to adjust the 2022 information and make that a budget for 2023, that's something that we can certainly address. I want to make sure that we understand their full need. And then we need to attack it. We need to decide how we're going to fund that.
Well, I think the truth is, you need to attack it like today.
Well, we want to.
Or it's not
What
gonna
we
be,
gave-
it's not gonna be a tomorrow.
What
and-
we did 2 weeks ago was a stopgap measure at best, for
But
a
that-
very short amount of
but that
time,
gets
probably
us
not
through-
even a month.
That gets us through to January 31st.
Yep,
And that's not like gray, that's.
and we don't
black
have
and
much
white.
time to act. I agree with you all, I do.
But what we want to do is set it up so that the EMS can operate and not have to worry about 2023.
Right.
And we can get everything covered, and we can work out some details in the meantime, but you guys will have the cash you need to hire the people to do the job. But I don't want to make a donation, let's just say it's $100,000, whatever it is, I'm just pulling a number. But let's just say it's 100,000, and then halfway through the year go, that's not quite where we wanted to be, we need more. Because, we're still a township government. When we allocate money, we sort of have to have things in a budget, and it has to be done a certain way. So, and if there's any extra fundraising that needs to be done, if we can help you with it, that's fine, but we need to know what the target is. And because we're not EMS people, we don't really know what all your needs are gonna be. And you can tell us, hey, it's really tough in June and July because we're short people, we might need to hire somebody else to help fill in the vacation spots or whatever. Anything you can think of that helps us put together some numbers so that we can work towards, getting the EMS up and running and make it solid, that is what a good thing, that's what we need.
The other thing we need to know is, are they collecting the memberships? The family, individual memberships. What is the rate now? It could be a higher, whatever the new rate is.
20%.
It can be done on put on the website. It can be,
It's already out on
announced.
social media.
Is it?
20% collection rate, yeah, it went out on both Stormstown
So-
neighbors and it went out on.
The day
Okay, so they
after
are collecting.
Yeah.
Okay.
The day after the meeting last time we had here, I went over to the EMS and I gave the secretary a check, personal check. I am 100% behind you guys.
Okay.
And it's not just using the power of the township office to help out. Everybody needs to dig into the wallet and cut them a check and send it over there. I'm not worried about getting my money back no matter what happens. But it needs to be done,
Dave,
so.
can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Quick.
Okay, again, I've been hearing all along, both the fire department and EMS, they are relying on donations, as if it's a charity. Okay, this is a service that should be provided for the township people, and they only get back 20%. If
We need to improve
if
that.
you have a dedicated tax, it is going to come out of every person's pocket in Half Moon Township, and that's how you support fire and EMS, to provide the services.
I would
You
like-
keep saying that everybody else isn't paying their fair share. 80% of Half Moon Township people are not paying their fair share.
What I was gonna say was, we don't just rely on private donations and memberships. There is a tax component to it. The tax for the fire company funding is still there. It's not a dedicated fire tax, it's in the general fund, and we do it by contract. So they are
Fire
getting their
department
money.
has a contract, from
No,
what you
it's
say.
not, let me speak for a minute. It's not fair to say that we're not funding the fire companies with tax money. We are. We're
It's
also-
not enough.
Then get your wallet out and help out.
Again, if you want to make it fair, you tax everybody in Half Moon
We-
Township to pay that tax service. And again, why can you not ask the
Well, it's
citizens of
still not
Half?
fair because some people ride the ambulance 12 times and some people never ride.
That's-
it.
Right, and
It's not fair. It's about funding the ambulance company, it's about funding the fire company and making sure they have what they need.
And making sure that
Whatever
they will be here
mechanism-
10 years from now too, or 20 years from now.
That's what budgeting is all about.
Correct, that's what budgeting is all about,
That's
which is
right.
why they need to have a guaranteed amount
But
of money
right-
that they're going to
And
get.
Based on a budget,
Yes, based
Yes.
on a budget.
Until,
agree.
until 2 months ago, it was all mystery meat as far as the public was concerned. Nobody knew the ambulance company was in trouble.
That's not at all true.
Well, some people knew, but
We, almost 5 years ago, we brought it up to COG that we were in trouble. 2 years ago, we brought it up and we were told to do a bake sale to make up an $8,000 deficit.
that was not this board, I can tell you.
Okay, well, I think
It
it
was
was
not.
the COG, not this board.
you mean the upper bald eagle half
Yeah.
moon cog, okay.
But I mean,
Go ahead.
those are the suggestions that we have gotten through the years, and that's why it has been very frustrating. And on not only for Port Matilda, as I say, this is a national crisis that nobody seems to be listening. And the same thing is gonna come out of everybody else across the country, is, geez, we didn't know this. It's been in the press, it's been in it's local newspapers for 2 years, it's been out everywhere on news stories
Well,
for 2 years.
Not to pick, but I called Port Matilda EMS a couple times earlier this year, like in the first half of the year, like June, somewhere in that zone. I never got a response back. I said who I was, what my position was, I wanted to know what was happening, can we help? Amy, did I not ask you or Brett to contact the Port Matilda Ambulance Company? And what happened? We didn't get a response. I didn't get a response till, I think it was like November. And it's not that I'm not trying to lay blame on anybody, but I've been around this place long enough to know that I know you guys aren't flush with cash, and I know you guys aren't flush with cash. Because I go back to when Karen Brown and Edie Johnson were running with the ambulance company. And I know they weren't flush with cash back then, but it was all kind of quiet, nobody said anything. But that's why I called, because I was concerned and I wanted to know. I mean, for all I know, you guys are sitting on $1 million over there. I didn't think so. But unless somebody calls up the township and says, hey, we got a problem and we're in trouble, what can we do? And I know Keith Reese is gonna have an Upper Bald Eagle COG meeting, I think on the 22nd of January, to try to get all the municipalities together. There's two aspects to this thing that I think we need to address. One is we need to get all the townships together so we're all pulling in the same direction with the fire and EMS. Okay? And number two, townships all gotta get together and figure out how we're gonna pay for all this. Okay, so part of it involves you guys. Once we have whatever we need to figure out to keep fire and ambulance running, that's fine, and we all have our target. We've gotta figure it out. Now, maybe Half Moon Township pays more, maybe they pay twice as much, I don't know. But the important thing is, we keep you guys going until we can all work out something that works. Obviously, Half Moon has a contract with the fire company, we have an agreement with the EMS, it ain't enough.
We also have a
something's-
contract with Warriors Mark
Yep,
Fire Company
right.
as well.
But-
We also receive service from Alpha and Center Lifelink,
Right.
and we don't
But-
have a funding component for them at all.
But if we have a contract, just like I brought up about the library contract earlier, we don't feel, or some of us don't feel that it's a fair contract. If you guys don't like the contract that we got, please come in and we'll talk about it. And we can work out something to get better allocations for these agencies. But somebody has to come in here and say, hey, we're not happy with this. And I know that in the last couple of weeks, we're not gonna recognize anybody until the supervisors are done. Once we figure out, where we gotta be and what we gotta do, then we'll get everything taken care of. And I know the ambulance company is on a short string, and we're gonna do what we can here in January to help them out and keep things going. But Roseanne, have you been contacted by the ambulance company about the mail out? She is not. So what was that, a month ago? We presented a flyer idea, haven't heard anything. I even said I'd help with the costs on that out of my personal pocket. But we have to have better communication between agencies and people in order to keep doing that. We can't just sit over there in our own little fiefdoms, and we can't sit over here as Halfmoon Township supervisors and say, I just don't know if we're.
I can address that issue as well, if you'd like.
Sure,
And that's
please.
because when we put out the notification that we were going to file with the state that we were closing down, that wasn't a warning shot. That was a notification directly as it was considered for months. There were no other options, and we did not want to send out a mailer for a service that we thought we'd start getting payments back, and then we'd shut down.
Right.
And it would be rather unfair, I think, to all the people that would at that point have sent, we'd have to try to return money.
When Roseanne and I went over was it November, Roseanne? When we went over in November and met with the ambulance company, nobody ever said we were in that bad a shape. They said that we had problems.
I'm really surprised, because this
And I'm
is
the
far
rep to
from
the upper
everyone.
body cog. I didn't hear. The only time I heard that was in the November meeting, I believe it was Jack was there, and he mentioned that, and that they had lost people, and they're having a hard time. The wages, the wages aren't high enough. The insurance companies aren't paying. There's all kinds of issues with that, and they can't get people to drive their transport service, which is very lucrative to them. That's what I was told at the meeting. I brought that information back here. I mean, I think we're all concerned about making sure the EMS is functional and operational and has what they need. But we have to do that. We have to do it soon. But it starts with just a summary of here's what we need.
Well, I believe if you haven't gotten that, drop me an email. I'll send you Jack's letter. It went out over social media too, exactly. So it's not like it's not transparent. It would be based on.
I don't doubt that it is.
You
I just want to
did not
get it.
receive that, because he
No.
told me he gave you the same figures he gave me.
I don't have it.
Okay.
But
We wanna help.
we'll get,
We
I'll,
definitely wanna
we'll get a
help.
hold of you, I'll get it, and we'll make sure that we see it and decide what we're gonna do to fund it.
Okay.
I mean, we gotta do it, and
Is
I
your
do agree
email-
with regular,
Is your email site on the township?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I do agree with regular budgets, regular, funding that people can depend on. We can't have it occasionally, just bailing out people, putting Band-Aids on things. We have to have a regular budgeting process, and we need to have enough money to cover the needs.
But we need to know what those numbers are. It sounds like you got them, so if you can get them.
I was
that would be
told without question they were provided before. I mean, I actually got this from both Woody.
I mean, they may have attempted, but I haven't seen anything. If I got an email from Jack, I would know it.
So if I could finish up and then let the next person go. So I heard somebody say that a lot of times the Board of Supervisors feel attacked during this period, which I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not here to attack anybody. I'm here to work with you to solve problems and make this a great place to live, right? But it does get very frustrating when we hear you say you don't have numbers. Well, I can't speak for the ambulance company, but for the fire company,
I have your number.
I know Chief Witherite's given a complete comprehensive budget, so that does get a little frustrating.
When I say I don't have, when I say complete budget, in my mind, a complete budget includes capital expenditures as well.
And his
A
included
line,
that.
a capital line, the latest one I believe does. And we had that discussion in the last meeting, and he explained that.
But he
and
provided them back in June.
I didn't see the capital line item in there in June.
All right, well, we're not here to pick. We want to help you, and we
But
want to
we'll
help
get
you.
there.
Okay.
And you guys help us, and we know it, so.
And if you need anything from us, from
Before
the
you
financial
leave,
side, ask me.
Virginia Norman had a question, and I think maybe she wants to ask one of you guys or the supervisors, so if you want to hang on a second. Please, Virginia, please go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know whether I'm directing this at Amy or the board, but I'm wondering, are the letters that you receive from citizens available to the public? Because I'd be very curious to see how many letters you've received regarding the library, the fire department, and EMS, either pro or con, because I have no idea what kind of feedback you've been getting from your constituents, and I'd be curious to know that.
We keep all the emails that come in and all the actual letters. We have those here at the township. I don't have a consolidated pile to tell you exactly who did what, but, I mean, I didn't count them up.
Is there a way, I really don't know, but I think from what I've been hearing tonight, people want to know what the general consensus is in the township. And I don't know whether that would be addressed by putting the letters on the website or, I don't know. I just think that, again, open lines of communication and clarity would be really important. And I'm assuming that when someone writes the Township Board of Supervisors, those are public record.
They are.
So is there a way that we could have that public record be more accessible?
That I will have to discuss with the board and the solicitor to see how we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else under? Okay. Go ahead, Karen.
Sharon.
Or Sharon, excuse me.
All right, can you see me?
Yep.
Yes. So I'm okay. All right, so I'm at work, and that's why I work in a healthcare facility, and that's why I'm wearing a mask, so I hope you can hear me. And I'm really sorry not to be at the meeting tonight, but because there was such short notice, I could not rearrange my work schedule to do so. However, I do plan to be at the meeting Monday. I do wish I am the township representative to the board. And honestly, I really wish that the courtesy of an email or phone call would have been presented, because now, honestly, my son came home from the Navy and I have to work now Christmas Day to switch shifts so I can go to the special meeting Monday night. And I feel horrible about it on several different levels. However, that's my feelings. The board doesn't have to jump through hoops for my schedule, certainly. 67% of Halfmoon residents have library cards. And just as a point of clarification, I've been fielding questions heartily for since this has been announced. And I've gone always back to the accountants or the library to get those answers as best as I can. I never answer them on my own. So when a resident has a library card, those numbers are not overinflated, because if you don't use your library card for 3 years, that number gets purged from the system. And also, maybe it's my fault on some level, because I came in and I said, hey, the library has discovery passes, the library has ukuleles, the library has book bags. And, people got the idea that it was entertainment. I've gotten on social media that it's, on the same level, a library is on the same level of an ice skating rink or a tennis court. But I've also come in and said that a library houses our information. Our library stores our information. It's the only guaranteed source of education after high school. Unless you pay for it, you enlist in the military, you go to a trade school, you go to a college or university. You are not guaranteed it anywhere else but a public library. My fear is this with the contract. And I know the other dialogue with it's just the contract, you can still fund the library. True, on one level. But the library and the Federation of Libraries cannot plan a budget that way. And the truth is, Halfmoon residents will lose some services. It's not a la carte. I am not speaking for the library in that regard. It's not, I am not, please, I'm not representing any library to say what will go or what will stay. But rest assured, like in Center County, libraries, you know, whether it's this year, whether it's next year, whether it's the year after, you know, if you can't budget, if you can't like go to vendors as a group, you lose that bargaining power. It's better if any, like if hospitals unionize or if, you know, tractor companies unionize and say, or farms and say, hey, we want to buy 10 tractors. What kind of deal can you give us? It's better to go as a group than it is individually. And that's what I have to say now. I will be in attendance at the special meeting Monday night, but that's just what I have to say, just for this moment in citizen comments.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like Virginia is not Virginia. Is that Lauren?
Okay, go.
Hi, this is Lauren Nauman. I've been on the planning commission previously for 19 years. I'm pretty well informed about the township functions and operations. I'm just wondering if it's possible that the board or that Amy could put the township's contract with the SLO library on the agenda so that those people interested in the community can read the current contract and be familiar with it, to have that conversation Monday night to find out what the pros and cons are, what the changes perceivably could be to keep the contract alive and more amenable to the Board of Supervisors and the public.
Amy, is that something you can do? Amy says she can do it, so we'll do it. Thank you. All right, there's no more comments. Let's move on. We have some developers here tonight, and next thing up is the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the agenda.
A motion, do I hear a second?
Yes.
Motion and a second, Roseanne seconds. Any questions by the board? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Okay, first thing up, approval of the minutes of December 8th, 2022. Do I hear a motion to approve the
Mr.
minutes?
Chair, I move that we approve the minutes.
A motion to approve, do I hear a second?
Yes.
Roseanne seconds. Any discussion by the board? Comments, spelling? Hearing none, call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next up, subdivision land development plans or conditional uses and public hearings. Halfmoon Acres replot 1702-004 and 1702-004A. Last revised November 22nd, 2022. Plan expires on the 31st of December. I'll let you take it, Mark.
Yep. So this plan proposes the replot of two existing lots along 550. The total acreage of the two properties is almost 328 acres. What will happen as a result of the replot is that the portion of one parcel that is on the north side of 550 would be separated off from the other portion on the south side. That southerly portion will be combined with an adjacent property. So what you would end up having is two properties. The one on the north side would be 161 acres. The one on the south side would be 166.8. So this plan was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting on Tuesday evening. At this point, we only have a few outstanding comments remaining that are fairly minor. We were waiting for a completed planning module to be submitted. We did have a planning module submitted yesterday afternoon. We haven't had time to complete the completeness checklist, but it looks to be fairly complete. There may be one minor item that's missing, which is a USGS map showing the outline of the proposed development, but otherwise I believe it looked complete. They did submit a revised plan as well and eliminated at least one other comment that was remaining. The only comment related to the subdivision and land development ordinance that still has not been addressed is they need to put a label around the replacement areas for the two existing homes. There will be one home on each lot that's currently existing. They have done the septic testing and they've identified these locations. They're just not clearly labeled, just to be, 100% clear, should another plan come in the future, we know which soil logs were for this plan in particular and can't be used again for another replacement or another septic site. So those were the remaining comments that needed to be addressed. The Planning Commission recommended that the board approve the plan with the condition that those comments be taken care of prior to being signed and being able to be recorded.
The condition is that all of those comments or whatever be properly addressed.
Correct.
And noted or whatever you do, labeled
Correct.
or whatever. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
I have a question for you on the sewage planning module.
Yes.
Obviously, we have not heard back from DEP because it hasn't been sent to DEP.
Correct.
So what, if we give it a conditional approval, is that pending upon approval by DEP, correct?
Yeah, I believe you can make that the condition, is once you receive approval from DEP that they have, approved the module, which will still need to be acted upon by the board at a future meeting. We don't have a resolution because we didn't have the module completed for you this evening. Once you've approved that and sent to DEP and you get that receipt back, then I believe you could.
And there's an
that could be your
approved
condition.
PNDI search on that property, or are they, how are they doing it, component one or component two?
It's a component two, and they do have a PNDI. It actually was a PNDI that covered more than just this property. I think they did that in relation to some other plans they had, and
That in relation to the other plan?
yeah, and the PNDI, they had correspondence back from there were two hits on the property, but both of the correspondence that came back from, it was Fish and Boat and DCNR, so there were no concerns that needed to be addressed physically on the property.
Would you like to state anything on your behalf?
I will definitely get those small modifications done ASAP.
As long as we understand the conditions for approval, clearly.
I'm
Is there not a
okay
problem
with
with
it, if staff and PC's okay with it, and does anybody from the board want to comment on that? All right, well then I'll make a motion that we conditionally approve the Halfmoon Acres replot of the parcels 17-24 and 17-24A, last revised November 22nd, 2022. Conditionally approve it based on, if you would please read the conditions off.
Yeah, so one condition would be that the applicant provide, or that we receive confirmation from the Department of Environmental Protection that the planning module has been found acceptable and approved, and that the applicant revise the plan to clearly label where the secondary or backup systems are for both of the existing homes on the properties.
Sounds good to me.
Good.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any comment by the Board of Supervisors? Comment by the public? Hearing none, call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and have a good Christmas.
All right, you as
All right.
well. Probably yours is gonna be better than it was.
Yeah.
Okay, land development plan, Sawmill Road Antenna Project expires January 12th, 2023. The plan number 2002-5. Mark, again, if you wanna do the rundown.
Yeah, in this particular case, this is a land development plan that proposes the construction of a wireless communications facility along Sawmill Road that would involve the installation of 32 ground-based wireless antennas. This property is at the corner of Sawmill and Halfmoon Valley Road, 550. Planning Commission reviewed this plan also at their meeting on Tuesday evening. There are a few outstanding comments, however, they're fairly minor, some of which are related just future permitting when they move forward with construction. I think the comments that are still applicable in this case, some of which were discussed by the Planning Commission, is they would like to see the actual details for the height, width, and appearance of these antennas to be incorporated into the plan set, so that it would be recorded with the county and it's clear what is going to be built on site. They need to remove the signature line for the vice chair of the board. There was a discrepancy with a setback line notation that needs to be fixed. They were requesting to pay a fee in lieu for the required parkland for this. There is a parkland requirement of 10% of the land area. They're asking to pay the fee in lieu, which I believe would be $1,000 based upon your parkland ordinance. And then also they need to verify post-construction infiltration per the township engineer. The Planning Commission also requested that the applicant install landscaping between the fencing that will be around this facility and the right-of-way, and the applicant did agree to that. They stated that it would have to be smaller, more ornamental type landscaping that wouldn't be higher than 8 feet, I believe they said, just to, I assume, not to interfere with the facility itself, but it would be enough to at least provide that visual buffer. And that was something that the Planning Commission requested, and that should be added to the plan set as part of any conditional
I
approval.
assume that the reason why the antennas themselves, I think they're 10 feet tall. At about 10 feet tall, the fence is about 6 feet. I think the reason why that is to provide basically a spherical access or connectivity, 360 degrees, in all directions.
And the Planning Commission did recommend that the board conditionally approve it with these outstanding issues being addressed. And I know that, there's a representative from the applicant here on Zoom here this evening.
I have one question before we go to him.
Sure.
It seems like it's more of a commercial use than an agricultural or residential use. How does this fit in with our ordinance? And I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. Your ordinance has a specific section in the zoning chapter that deals with I believe it's titled telecommunications facilities. And it doesn't really have any restrictions on the locations of these facilities by zoning district, with the exception of tower-based antennas. If this was a tower, it has to be in an agricultural district, which this is as well. There's more restrictions in terms of height and setbacks for a tower-based. I believe when this plan came in, and I was not the planner at the time, the zoning officer and the planner at that time looked at it and determined that it met the definition of a base station in your ordinance, which is essentially just a collection of antennas. So again, your ordinance doesn't restrict these uses from being, actually I believe, in any zoning district. And I would note that there's been some changes from the FCC and the state related to telecommunications facilities and how limited municipalities can be in restricting them. Your ordinance probably isn't up to date on some of that, but I don't know that you would be able to outright restrict these from.
More than likely, we can't control a lot of this stuff.
Right.
But we can make them landscape.
Absolutely. And they did agree to that, so they just need to show that on an
You
updated
want to,
plan
for the
set.
public's sake, explain what these antennas are for, if you know.
Well, I believe, there's the applicant's representatives here. My understanding is to support wireless internet from satellite-based internet, but they could probably explain better exactly what this facility will do.
Do you want to let them?
All right, let's.
Why don't they introduce themselves?
And please introduce yourself. Is he frozen?
Over Zoom. I'm Rex Atkinson with 5-9 Design Group, and we're the architects and engineers involved in putting this plan together, and a representative of the telecommunication company. This particular project is a antenna yard of the 32 antennas that support the Starlink internet type program at your home. So this yard makes that those Starlink antennas faster. It provides a faster internet to your home. It taps into a fiber optic line that's across the street. So they combine the over-air satellite internet with the speed of fiber optics.
While you're there, because I know it keeps coming up, is that high-speed internet going to be usable to the people of Halfmoon Township, or is it going to be fed off to New York somewhere? Did we lose you?
Just lose him?
Yeah, It's for the county, and the surrounding area. It's Starlink. It's a support for Starlink type program. So a satellite-based internet for your home. So it's for everybody within an area of the base station.
Well, my specific question was, does it provide high-speed internet for the people in Halfmoon Township? Or is that not possible?
Yes, no, it does. Yes, like I said, it's the Starlink program. So you have the satellite dish at your home, and so yes, it will be for the county.
So is this a separate, I'm not familiar with Starlink.
Oh, Starlink is a satellite-based internet company for your house. A lot of times it kind of fills a gap where high-speed internet might not be available, and so you can get a satellite receiver for your house. It's a satellite-based internet.
It's not like a dish, like Dish Network or DirecTV, or is it?
Similar,
Okay,
yeah. So
similar.
Starlink, SpaceX, and Starlink, they launched all these low Earth satellites that go around the Earth, not too dissimilar from satellite-based TV, and so it's a satellite-based internet company.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Mark, what is the size of the parcel that the antennas will take up?
The size of the parcel or the size on the parcel?
The size of that'll be fenced in with the antennas.
Yeah, let me just pull up that plan here real quick. It's fairly small. I believe it's, it's definitely well under an acre in size. Let me see if I can get you a ball.
Off the top of my head, I think the fence is like, what, 80 by 100?
That sounds about right. Yeah, looking at the plan here, that looks about right.
So 8,000 square feet.
Yeah.
That's like a fifth of an acre.
Right.
Well, we got a lot of hands going up here. Go ahead, please. But please come up to the microphone so that I can torture people, so.
First time I wanted to add a comment just to give it context. So Starlink is what a lot of people in the Ukraine are using to have internet access right now. And it's, correct me if I'm wrong, this is Elon Musk's company, correct?
SpaceX.
Yes.
Okay, that just gives a little more context. And then my question then was, do the people of Halfmoon Township get any kind of discount on this service? Is this something we can use to replace our Comcast with?
I don't know the pricing based of it. I do know that it's local to the area, but I don't know the pricing.
Is this something that's going to be presented to the community for access or for purchase, or it will be marketed to the community? Like, how do we know about this service being available to us?
That's a good question. It is something I would ask SpaceX on our kind of weekly call. It would be a good thing to provide kind of what their planned rollout, of when to offer it to the county would be.
I think it provides a whole new perspective when we understand what benefit it has to the township. And, that's something everybody will understand, and then they can see the relevance of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Lady in the back.
I was just curious, like, what percentage of us actually have that? Because, like, I've never heard of it, so.
It's a new thing.
It's
I
like
know that.
0 right now? Okay.
Yeah, it's very new. They haven't done a lot of these yards here yet. SpaceX had launched their Starlink and different have bought it kind of around the country, but this new base station is a way to kind of speed it up to try to compete with the fiber optics and the kind of the Comcast, the cable internet company.
All right, Ms. Miller, you're next.
Why did they decide in Halfmoon Township that they want to put this?
I'll have to answer
Yeah, the exact placement is a little above my head. I know they analyze that need through different databases as far as the technology is concerned to see where there's theoretically would be the most use, and probably population groups, areas that might be underserved by current internet providers.
I think part of it would be economics too. And there is a tie-in between this facility and the fiber optic facility, which is in that building, that nondescript building It's right across Sawmill Road from where this is going.
By the donkeys.
Yep. And which, when I tried to find out what was there or what they were putting in, nobody could tell me anything.
Yeah. Ms. Hughes?
Yeah, I was just going to say that you've been asked directly several questions about service to Half Moon and so forth, and you don't seem to know the answer or can't tell us. All I'm hearing is vague comments about offers to the county or something. And to clarify, in order to get this service, you would have to have a dish, something.
I believe this gentleman is an engineer,
That
not a
is correct.
salesman.
You would need a dish, yeah, and I'm sorry for any part about not knowing the exact part of it. We do the design and engineering, and I don't know all the ins and outs of the company. We just do the technical side of the drawings and whatnot for them, and I would have to bring questions back about different technical sides about customer service and things like that.
All right, thank you.
There's a question, Tom.
Yeah.
Majewski has
Yeah,
a
go
question.
ahead and put him on there if you would.
Go
You hear me?
Yep.
Are these dishes, are they stationary dishes, or are they gonna be on movable pedestals to track the satellites?
So they are stationary. If you kind of look at the plan that's up, it has a square base and a circle on the front of it. So the antennas, they rotate 360 degrees to follow the satellites.
Oh, so they are gonna be constantly moving to track the satellite?
That's correct.
Okay.
So inside the dome. is
Inside a dome, yes. There's a plastic protective dome on top of it, and the satellite rotates.
Okay, that's
Or
all.
the antenna, sorry.
Okay.
That's all, thank you.
Thank you. What do we need to do here tonight?
Is it for the people, for us?
We don't know that.
It's
We're trying to find out.
It sounds like
it's a company, this is a
new
business
technology.
transaction with the owners of the property, basically.
And it sounds like it's a new technology that will be offered for purchase by the community to basically compete. What I'm hearing is to basically compete with services like Comcast, or possibly, it's internet service though. It's not it could be streaming TV at some point, I would imagine, but we just don't know anything more about it.
But it is a satellite based. Yes, you get a
Yeah.
satellite receiver for your house and deal directly with the Starlink company.
Virginia has a
Excuse me.
question.
Yeah, go ahead, Virginia.
I'm sorry. My daughter lives in Colorado, and Starlink is out there for areas that don't have good internet service. Starlink has been very successful out there, and to the point where they have sold out, and there's now something like a 3-year waiting list to get onto the Starlink system. But perhaps this would help areas at the western edge of the township that have very unreliable internet service. The people in Colorado who have Starlink seem to be very happy with it. It is an Elon Musk company, but so what? So just to let you know that, like out in Colorado, there are people who are working, who are enjoying the service right now.
Thank you for that.
I'll just add that 20 some years ago, we had a Starlink system when we had a satellite dish on our roof because we weren't able to get internet and access anyway. So it's been around for a long time. I have to say it didn't work very well.
I suspect it's highly upgraded.
Yeah, it probably is, but it didn't work very well.
Okay.
It did not. Yeah, my parents had HughesNet out in the country, and it did not work well. So there's been a big advance in technology.
and got HughesNet, and it didn't work any better.
It did not. No.
The satellites aren't great, at least the old technology. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, if I could ask a perhaps naive question of the engineer, does this installation have any negative impact whatsoever on any of the existing telecommunications or any other options currently in the township?
It's possible, the way competition works, if one company would lose money, the other one gains money. But beyond who buys something, I don't see where it would have a negative impact.
So I guess let me rephrase that question. The reason it's located where it is partly due to this telecommunication or the fiber optic building or whatever.
I would imagine.
The donkey.
Yeah, and I can give you some background on that. The building across the street is what's known to the fiber optic company as a regeneration building. Fiber optics run on glass filament light, and the signal needs to be regenerated every 50 to 60 miles. So this is a place where it regenerates, and so it's also a good place just to tap into the fiber.
Okay, but this process of tapping in doesn't negatively impact any of the existing utilities in the township. It's just a convenience thing. That's why it's cited the way it is.
Yep, yeah, it is convenience. Yeah, it does not. The way fiber optic is more what I have done. It's more my background, which is why I'm still learning about everything for SpaceX. The fiber optic has a lot of bandwidth, and kind of the way fiber optics have been going in the past 10, 15, 20 years is there is a lot of bandwidth, and different companies like Facebook and Google and Microsoft will put servers in here to utilize that speed. Smaller companies can also use these ILAs, as they're called, light amplification stations, to access the fiber at those locations.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so what do we need to do tonight?
So the recommendation from the planning commission was to conditionally approve this plan, understanding that the plan expires here in a couple of weeks. Really, again, there's some minor things remaining just to include some details of the actual antennas in the plan set, include the details for the landscaping within the plan set, and then address the remaining staff comments like removing the signature line for the vice chair and fixing a minor error in one of the setback notes.
Have we received a letter requesting or granting us a time extension?
We have not, no.
Okay, and I see it expires on January the 12th.
Correct.
Which is close.
Yes, it is.
I do have a question.
Yes.
With regard to technology, in terms of interference, potential interference, I assume that this is the regulatory agency that governs the licensing or the use of this is the FCC.
That would be for Mr.
Federal Communications
Atkinson
Commission.
to address.
So, and I assume that there's licensing process there that they've met, the need has been met. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Starlink has a license with the FCC.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing that the board would need to do this evening is to make a decision on the parkland dedication offer, where they're offering fee in lieu in place of parkland in this particular case.
So it would be 10% of 8,000 square feet?
No, it'd be 10% of the entire property where you're parking.
What is that?
It's pretty large. Let me see here real quick. Sorry, the county's Webbia system doesn't actually show the size of the lot. Let me just pull it up here on the plan set.
That's the acre neighborhood of
Well, I think it was subdivided a couple years ago, so this is just on the one piece, and I wasn't certain how big that piece was. Let me see here. It's listed on the plans. It's 18.92 acres, so you'd be looking at 1.8 acres of parkland if that was something the township had wanted in place of, rather than they're offering fee in lieu to the township instead.
But that's not something that we decide, right? They can offer in lieu of.
They can,
Or
so
can we require?
The ordinance requires that they provide parkland. They can offer fee in lieu, which is up to the board whether or not you want to accept it. They're required by ordinance to actually provide the land, but if they choose to offer fee in lieu, the township can then accept that in place of physical land. And
Is that different than just open space?
correct.
So, because open space, it would still belong to them. The parkland, it would actually belong to the township.
That's right. It would have to be subdivided off of the property and deeded to the township to
I
be
thought
considered
some of that
parkland.
was.
That's not
open
something they
space.
want to do, or that's not something they're required to do? I don't, I'm not sure. What would be the benefit of $1,000 in lieu of compared to 1.8 acres of dedicated parkland?
Well, I believe that you can use your money towards park improvements here in the township for your existing parks.
Mhm.
So it's really a matter of whether or not the township wants more parkland. In this case, they're saying, we're willing to offer you money in place of physical land that you would then have to take care of.
Used for the parks.
Right, and you can use that money then for the parks.
But the lieu of funding is based on an ordinance.
It's based on your ordinance. There's a formula in there that it's $1,000 per disturbed acre. In this case, where they have less than an acre, it says the minimum is $1,000.
I got another question along that line. When the Bars got divorced and the missus took the north side and Mr. took the south side,
Yes.
because there was 50% open space required in the ordinance, I thought that the open space got dumped on the south side of 550 on that particular piece. That doesn't restrict it, I guess. I know they were allowed to do like 3 lots or something, which they did, I guess, but.
Right. Yeah, as I recall, and I apologize, I wasn't the first planner to review the plan.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. I don't recall that being something that was found during any of the reviews, that this was, required open space that couldn't be further utilized for other uses.
What I'd like to do, we're gonna be having another meeting in January, and I hate to put these guys off, but they got a few things that they know they have to do for us. And I'm recommending we just table that plan until.
Dave, it's so minor, why can't we just vote on it tonight?
You wanna
Why
do
can't
that?
we just follow the recommendation?
All right, but we haven't seen the landscape plan, and.
I don't know that they're providing.
There
one.
are conditions too.
Okay, well, if
but
the
that's
board,
part of
if
the
the board would like to,
conditions.
if you wanna do that, that's fine. We'll
The
entertain
parkland
those.
dedication bothers me. I mean, I can't see the comparison, the parity between $1,000 in lieu of parkland and 1.8 acres of dedicated parkland. Is there any practical reason why?
Well, we don't want the
want-
land, cause it doesn't do us any good. It's not like in the parks. There's no park there, so it's not
Right.
like you're gonna get.
Okay, I'm just.
Anything's functional. If they want to pay the fee, that's
Right.
better for us.
This is the first time I actually participated in the discussion of fee in lieu of dedicated parkland,
Well,
so.
we had to provide both when that ordinance was created.
Okay,
And so,
I'm okay with approving it
We need 2
conditionally.
separate motions on that?
you can split it. Patty, you want to make the
I move that we approve the planning commission, or the recommendation for the antenna, what's it called, the antenna project land development plan, that is with the above noted plan, with the condition that outstanding staff comments be addressed.
I hear a second.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion by the board on that motion? Hearing none, call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. So, there's one, and you want to do a second motion.
Sure. I move that we accept the $1,000 in fee of lieu of for the parkland at said antenna farm.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Plan,
Conditional approval.
conditionally approved.
All right, thank you. And it's my intention to get you everything back, before the 12th. But if I don't, I might go ahead and move forward with that expansion letter to give me a little bit of cushion.
All right, faster the better. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Halfmoon Towing, vehicle storage yard, expires January 11th, 2023. And Mark, again, you're on.
Yeah, so in this particular case, the applicant is proposing the development of a private garage with yard for vehicle storage on a property that's located along Granny Lane. This vehicle storage yard would be enclosed by a fence. The property is a little under 18 acres in size and is zoned agricultural. Planning Commission discussed this at their meeting on Tuesday night as well. Most of the significant comments that had been identified in the initial review had been addressed, but there are at least 2 kind of significant comments remaining, one of which relates to the parkland that was being offered. There was an offer of actually more than 10% of the property as passive parkland. As was noted in staff's review, we had concerns that it doesn't really meet the township's requirements for parkland dedication. It would be difficult to access and primarily just contains floodplains and steep slopes and wetland areas. Probably the biggest issue with this plan at this point is that, per the zoning officer's determination, the use that's being proposed on the property is not permitted within the agricultural district. The agricultural district permits public and private garages for the storage and maintenance of motor vehicles, inspection of vehicles, and accessory use or sale of new and used vehicle parts. But in this particular case, the storage is going to be entirely outside. It won't be taking place within a garage as the ordinance permits. And while you do allow certain storage yards within the ag district, they have to be related to a business use such as like electricians or construction trades. So what the applicant had done is they did provide an extension. I don't think the date's listed in here, but it's sometime in March, I believe March 24th, to the township, and their interest was to ask the board if you would be willing to consider an ordinance amendment to allow this use within the agricultural district. There's an application fee and a form they'd have to fill out to formally request that, so they wanted to at least gauge the board's interest in even considering it before they submitted such an application. So I believe Chad Stafford is here on Zoom tonight to provide you with some information about the applicant's interest.
Ironically, this is the same, was he part of the same original farm that the antennas are coming off of at one time? Mr. Stafford, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I hear you. Go
Okay,
ahead,
great.
please.
Yeah, so, I'm sure Amy can show the plan as to what our intent was and what have you, and like Mark indicated, I think from an engineering standpoint, that, we probably have everything kind of wrapped up as far as, Mr. Francis' approval of the stormwater, we have ENS approval. We don't have sewage module, approval, however, I forgot until this evening, but I sent both Mark and Amy a time extension request for the planning module also to go into March. But as Mark indicated, between Mark and Nicole, they believe that the intent that we're trying to have here for the development does not meet the language in the ordinance. And if you look at the ordinance, the first section of the ordinance, 255-13A, very specifically describes public and private garage for the storage and maintenance of motor vehicles, inspection of vehicles, and the accessory use or sale of new and used vehicle parts. We believe what Mr. Barr is trying to do here very specifically meets those intended pieces that are described, private garage with motor vehicles and accessory uses. There's a second part, as Mark also indicated, under section B, yard storage, businesses include offices, and it lists things like Mark indicated, road materials, equipment, excavation, electrician, construction trade, well driller, specific and septic operation. Equipment is kind of that can be vehicles, that can be a whole gamut of things. So when we approached Mark and Amy and Nicole in mid-August on this, or late August on this, we had kind of had the plans about 80%, and we described what we're going to do and what have you. Mr. Barr then provided a letter to the township that very specifically described his intended use. As we know, Mr. Barr owns Halfmoon Valley Towing. His goal here is to initially build a small office building for the operation and maintenance and management of this site for the temporary storage of vehicles. He's indicated in a letter to the township that those vehicles would be here 30 to 60 days, and so it'd be kind of a transient kind of maneuvering of the vehicles. The vehicles would come in for a certain period of time, then they would go out. Where they go out to, it could be a whole bunch of different things. One of the things he talked about is that he had a contract with like the state police, for instance, and he would take on the impound vehicles, and then they go out after a certain period, they get processed and all that kind of thing. But he would use it for his same kind of operations and facilities that he does now. His next goal would be to actually build a physical garage on this property. The way this site's laid out, we estimated the other night there'd be probably 60 vehicles maximum that would be able to be stored within that area. So we're just asking that the township supervisors consider the fact that we believe that we're meeting the intent of what the ordinance was for this limited industrial use. But obviously, that's why we're here asking for this for consideration so that we can move the land development plan forward. You know, and again, we gave a grant of request to extend that to March, with the hopes that we can get through the zoning amendment, and that the supervisors would consider that.
So you're asking us to amend the zoning ordinance to permit this?
That's correct. And again, we haven't made an official request yet, Dave, but.
Well, I knew that, I'm
that's
just
what we're here,
trying to figure where we're going with it, so.
yeah.
What is the ramifications of amending this particular ordinance to allow this particular use?
Well, I think things to keep in mind, so obviously we haven't done any type of, study or putting together any type of ordinance with standards, but just generally speaking, this was identified, as a zoning officer interpreted as more or less a towing or impound yard based on the information we received from the applicant. A use like that, is it consistent with your agricultural district? I think that's a question the township would need to really answer. Is it what you feel is appropriate? Your agricultural district is, I believe, your largest district in the township.
I'm not sure antennas are either.
I understand that, I think, but that is the question that the board will probably need to consider if you want to move forward with considering this, is this an appropriate use that you would want to see possibly in other locations throughout your agricultural
Well, my
areas?
only question is, how do we do that? How do we get there? We as supervisors.
Well, I think
How do we determine that?
There's a couple of things you can do. You can take a look at what your intentions of your agricultural district are, which is generally to keep the area rural and protect natural resources and the rural character. I think that's a judgment decision on behalf of the community of whether or not you feel that use really meets the intention of that district.
We have ordinances for a reason.
Yes.
They specify what we can and cannot do with land.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, before we go amending an ordinance, is there something that can be done to make this facility comply with the ordinance? Something more that could be done to meet the ordinance requirements?
I think based on the zoning officer and I looking at this, and I don't have the ability to interpret the zoning ordinance legally as I'm not your zoning officer, but I think looking at it, being that this is going to be outdoor storage and it doesn't meet the literal wording of the ordinance here, and the fact that the vehicles, from what we've been told, are going to be stored there for just a temporary basis, they're not being repaired on site. I don't know there's anything that can be done easily to just make that happen. I think that the ordinance amendment is probably the only real path forward to make this a legal thing. And tonight, you're not being asked to commit to change the ordinance, it's just whether or not you're even interested in considering it, so the applicant doesn't waste time and money in asking for something that the board has no interest in.
In terms of compliance with the ordinance, it says an enclosure. Whatever is happening, if it's within an enclosure, it's somehow comply. That's what I heard.
Well, it's public or private garages.
Public or private
It
garages.
specifically has the word garages, and so I think the issue here is that these vehicles won't be stored in a garage, they're gonna be stored outside. And a fair number of them as well, and they're just going to be stored there for a temporary period and then moved elsewhere, it sounds like.
Mark?
Where is it?
Granny Lane.
Granny Lane, right across from Sawmill Road going up the mountain. Mr. Houts,
I'd like to make a comment.
you want to come up here and,
Let me, so, an acceptable use that's similar at this point is a public garage. There would be a garage, but as we know, public garages also store their cars outside if they're working on cars, right? And then did I hear also, that could it be for sale? Cars for sale, because that would be an outdoor lot.
Correct.
Okay, so there's things that are close to this, but not just actually addressed an impound yard that are currently permitted. Okay.
Okay, my name's Don Outs. I currently do have storage in Halfmoon Township. And to create my storage, I had to have a light industrial property, and that was in 1995. And that's all indoor storage. I did do outdoor for a period of time. But if you make an amendment to a current zoning ordinance, I would think it's to benefit the community, or financial benefit to the community, or to enhance the environment. And I'm not sure that a 60-car junkyard is going to do any of the above. So I wanted you to consider once this is amended, every Half Moon ag brought field down 550 can then have a so-called storage yard. That's it.
If I may say, this is not a junkyard, and that's not a fair statement to try to classify that.
I meant 60 car storage yard, sorry.
I was gonna ask Mr. Hobbs.
Well, let me ask this
Well, wait a
question.
minute, Ron.
Good, all right.
Don, when you got that property, was it zoned light industrial, or did you get the zoning changed on that?
Dean McNeil and Paul Brown had it zoned light industrial because they were gonna put a excavating garage
Okay.
on it, and they had to have it done for an excavating garage.
I thought it was
Which
before your
also,
time, but-
it was an ag property then.
Yeah.
But to put an excavating garage, they had to have it rezoned to light industrial. And then when I looked at the property, storage was one of the things you could do, and it had to be light industrial. And there's another means for light industrial. Does this property border 550?
I think it does, but I think there's probably a stream and a wetland in the way, so, but there's a lot to it. The supervisor's gonna have a lot to consider. Ms. Brooks?
No, I just.
Oh, I thought you were gonna.
A wetland
And
for
put
cars
cars by
outside.
Yeah, it's not a good.
My question was going to
That's what I
be,
just said.
my question was going to be, okay, you got an impoundment yard, which could consist of vehicles, potentially damaged vehicles, potentially disabled vehicles. I assume they take these in, they would potentially work on them, repair them or whatever. What is a junkyard? A junkyard is a yard where vehicles are often stored. A wreckage, a company that repairs collision damaged vehicles has an impoundment yard where they keep them. My concern is the proliferation of this, and I'm not inclined to agree with amending the ordinance. I mean, that's just my thought on it.
Personally, what I'd like to see is that the engineer bring back a list of what they could do to bring that facility into the compliance with our ordinance, or what they thought the minimum we would have to do to alter our ordinance to comply with that, project. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, I'm just saying that I don't know how far off. It's been a while since I read the ordinance. I was your zoning officer at one time, but, it's been a long time, and there's been changes made since I was here. So I'd like to see how far away it is from reality, or if it's a major change or a minor change, or the site itself could be brought into compliance without changing the ordinance at all. And then at least the supervisors would have something to consider as to whether we want to go forward or not with that proposed amendment.
Mark, was there any discussion about parkland fee in lieu of?
There was at the planning commission level, when they discussed it on Tuesday evening. Up until that point, they've been proposing to give this land to the township, which it sounded like from the meeting on Tuesday night, that land may already be planned for dedication to Clearwater. So it sounded as though the applicant might look to find additional land on the property to give to the township, or possibly just pay the fee in lieu, as in this case, I believe it would also be $1,000 based on
Okay.
the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. We had talked about that. There's been discussion with the Clearwater Conservancy to give them the area that was also identified that we could offer for parkland to the township. But then after further discussions with the planning commission, I think Mr. Barr would be inclined. He has the ability. He can give the 1.7 acres to the municipality if they want the land. If not, he would have no issue providing the fee in lieu, depending on what would be necessary if this moves forward.
Do you have a letter requesting or granting the township a time extension?
Yeah, I did, Dave. I think it's, like Mark said, I think it's up to March 24th, so that it gives us some time that we can, get information back from the municipality for consideration. And there's a second letter, again, fortunately, I just emailed this evening to Amy and to Mark, that ask for a time extension, or grant a time extension, excuse me, for the sewage modules also for March 2023.
I personally think, in my opinion, one member of the board, that we ought to grant the time extensions and allow them to come back with more information so the board can make an educated decision on the proposal.
I don't know if Zach has something to say.
Go ahead, Zach.
Go ahead, Zach.
Mr. Chair, if I can jump in, I just wanted to, I haven't been heavily involved with this, so I wanted to ask Mark, has Nicole, as a zoning officer, had an opportunity to actually formalize a zoning officer determination on this question yet?
Well, I think the closest thing to that, Zach, was the latest review letter dated December 20. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not the latest review letter. That was the memo I put together yesterday. The latest review letter that went out to the applicant does have a more or less a determination that this would be a towing and impound yard. That's how the zoning officer felt it would be classified. That was a letter dated November 29th.
Okay. And the only reason I ask that is, especially in light of if the extension is the route that the board goes, and I think that sounds like probably the more prudent route tonight, that it might be beneficial if the developer were to indicate to the zoning officer precisely what it is that the developer is proposing and how the developer characterizes the use. And at that point, then Nicole could perhaps issue a formal zoning determination as that process is laid out in the MPC. And at that point, then the developer can either try to appeal that determination to the ZHB or accept it and perhaps ask for an amendment to the zoning ordinance. But at least at that point, everybody will understand there's been a formal documentation of precisely what this use is and how it's being characterized. So that might be something worth looking at, because I know just from reviewing some of the comment letters, it seems there's some maybe differing views or a perspective that multiple uses might be being considered here, or different characterizations of that use. So that's something perhaps if the extension is the route the board goes, that if you'd like, I could work with you and Nicole to try to figure out what is the best route as far as any sort of zoning determination.
It's a pleasure of the board.
As long as we're not, given any kind of approval to amend the ordinance, but we're just allowing them more time to either comply with it or tell us, or get a determination, like you said.
Well, we need to do
I don't
that.
know, what action do we have tonight?
Well, we can deny the plan, or we can, accept the extension. And I would recommend that we accept the extension and get a determination from the zoning officer how this is to be treated. So once we know how the zoning
So
officer.
we don't know what's classified yet.
Right,
officially.
but once the zoning officer makes that determination, then we'll know how to attack the situation, whether anything needs to be done, or the board has to hold a hearing. It doesn't have to hold a hearing, or we can deny it outright, or whatever. But we need that zoning officer's determination to go forward, in my opinion.
What was the planning commission's recommendation?
They recommended that if the board were to take action this evening, that you deny the plan based on the fact it doesn't meet the ordinances, but understanding that the applicant was going to be here requesting the ability to come forward with more information and possibly an ordinance amendment, and then the extensions would be appropriate at that point.
So if I understand this right, the planning commission is recommended to deny the plan because of what the zoning officer had determined, and now you're asking to do an extension on what she's gonna determine. Is she gonna change her mind?
No, it's the planning commission recommended that the board deny the plan if they chose to take action tonight. In other words, if the board was completely uninterested in even considering an ordinance amendment at all, or providing the applicant more time to try to work through the issues, then they recommended denial because our letter did indicate there's deficiencies.
Right.
It's not giving the zoning officer more time to provide a determination. I think the difference between what Mr. Rice said and what was provided, I think he's saying a more formal determination of exactly what the use is, so that it's something that the applicant can choose to appeal if they want to. Because what was issued previously was just a comment letter from staff.
We have to be very careful about turning things down to make sure that we have done everything in accordance with the MPC, or it could come back to haunt us. And I've had enough haunting.
Dave, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Given that it's a really sensitive area with a pond and the headwaters and all of that, what does a letter from the Center County Conservation District say?
we have approval for erosion sedimentation for the design and engineering. So we have that approval, as submitted. The engineer for the municipality has reviewed the plans, and, he had one comment, but I believe we had satisfied that, but I don't think he followed up with a revision, approval letter on the submission of the plan.
The plan as determined to be adequate by the Center County Conservation District is valid for 5 years from the date of issue. So they've got their erosion sedimentation control plan under 102, so that's approved. But I'm not inclined to, I'll just let you know, I'm not inclined to change the ordinance. But we have to, in municipalities, under the second-class township code and the MPC, if the plan meets the law, the ordinances of the township, and they get all their state and county approvals, then we basically have to approve it. If we deny that plan, then we're violating regulations. So we need a determination from the zoning officer so that we can make a decision as to what can be done. We can give Mr. Stafford time to come back with any kind of revisions that he's proposing. And let's just say if the building's too big for the site and they gotta shrink the size of the building, it gives them an opportunity to do that.
Dave, isn't the process of this, isn't that in a non-building lot at this point in time?
That's what I need to find out also.
And then isn't the sewer module the step one before you can do anything?
Well, you definitely need
Having an
sewer
approved sewer
planning
module
module
before you
approval,
can
which we
even
don't
go,
have.
before you can even do a plan?
But they've asked for an extension on that. I don't know what the testing's been done or what's not been done. But I don't see there's any harm in granting an extension. But if they have to change the ordinance, it would have to be a hearing, and the board may decide, and I haven't told anybody, but the board may decide that we are not interested in holding a hearing and modifying the ordinance. But they still have to be afforded the opportunity to bring the plan into compliance.
For the record, the sewage planning module has been completed in the sense that it was complete. They had the SEO sign off on the testing that was done. The outstanding issues are there's the 2 planning reviews in there, and they are both, coated with a lot of commentary that would probably get this rejected by DEP. So I think the applicant would rather not go through getting that approved and knowing it's just going to be rejected by the state.
Is that component 2 as well?
It's component 2 as well,
Should
yes.
be. And that's a long process.
Right.
So,
And what about property values too? I don't know.
well, if it's something that's legal in our zone, then we have to approve it. If it's not, then we don't have to, well, we're not gonna approve it, I can tell you that. But if they decide to appeal, and come to the board and say, we wanna change the ordinance, whatever, then we'll have to have a hearing and go through that process. But they have certain rights under the municipality's planning code we have to comply with, and we wanna make sure that we are not violating their rights. So,
One of them, though, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just assuming one of them is, one of the requirements is that we don't have to amend the ordinance.
No, you don't have to.
And if we accept their granting of a time extension, is there any potential to change the plan to make it comply in any way, shape, or form?
I mean,
I'm
that's
hearing no, but I don't know.
probably comes down to how much they're willing to change it,
Right.
yeah.
But that does allow, I mean, that would be one of the potential outcomes. I mean, it's up to that, but it could be a potential
The problem
outcome.
is, if we turn the plan down tonight, and we have the reasons to turn it down, and they come back and they meet all the requirements of the turn down, then the plan's automatically deemed approved. And so, that's not a situation I think we wanna be in right now. So, at this point, we can delay it by, accepting the extension they've granted us. And that would give them time, and our zoning officers some time, and our staff some time to take a look at it and just make sure all the ducks are in a row, so to speak.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're not in the village district or in a light industrial zoning, you have to either have a home occupancy business, meaning you have to live there.
Yep.
Or you have to meet with light industrial standards.
Basically.
It's one or the other.
It's not compliant the way it is. I can tell you
Yeah,
that.
the agricultural zoning indicates that there are specific limited industrial uses that can be there. So, just to answer that gentleman's question, and that's what we're trying to get figured out here and approach the township supervisors with, because as Attorney Rice indicated, we do have a slightly different opinion than the zoning officer does in regards to the interpretation of the language in the ordinance.
But the appeal of the zoning hearing, or the zoning officer is the zoning hearing board, not the board of supervisors.
Right.
Well, I think the zoning officer has to make a determination, so that that process can either go forward or stop or whatever. Well, supervisors?
Zach, you recommend accepting the extension? Is that your recommendation?
Yeah, I think, I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I think in this instance, an extension is appropriate. I think you've got the developer that's in good faith evaluating its options, and I think from the board's perspective, getting a formal, final, binding determination from the zoning officer as to, based on how the developer is proposing and depicting the use, here is the zoning officer's determination as to whether it complies with zoning or not. And then from that point, there's a couple different routes that it can go, but at the end of that process, everybody knows where it's at, and you know, perhaps the plan moves to you, and you have a use that the zoning officer has determined to not be in compliance, and then in that instance, you would very likely have a valid justification to deny the plan. Perhaps the zoning officer says that it complies with zoning, perhaps the zoning officer says it doesn't, and the developer avails himself of the right to the appeal to the zoning hearing board. That process plays itself out, and at the end of it, we still arrive at a place where we've got a final binding determination that allows you to ultimately adjudicate a decision on this plan and know, we know how the zoning question has been answered, as opposed to sitting here tonight where it seems like it's still a bit up in the air. I think that justifies the extension that's been offered here.
Okay. I move that we grant an extension.
For the module and the plan.
I say it's for both, just to be clear.
Planning module and the plan. Okay.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Patty seconds. Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Extension is granted till, is that, where's the date on that thing?
It's March 24th for the plan, March 22nd for the planning module,
Okay.
based on the letter that was submitted today.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you guys for your time.
All right, thank you. All right, motion to approve the consent agenda for general funds in the amount of $24,809.01, open space preservation in the amount of $375, capital reserve of $28,516.30, state highway local fuels funds in the amount of $787.35. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Possible discussion item, 2023 meeting date discussion and permission to advertise dates and times. We have to do this, so, Amy, I assume you have something together on that, or maybe not.
Well, I did advertise for the organization meeting for January 3rd. You can have that discussion then if you do so chose, but I don't know if you want to have 2 meetings a month.
Well, I was gonna say, did
One
we,
meeting?
at the organizational meeting, did we advertise to conduct regular business?
I did advertise it that
Okay,
way.
because I think we're probably gonna be talking about an ambulance thing after we get organized.
Yeah.
Well, we may or may not need 2 meetings a month, but the thing is, if you advertise them, you can cancel them.
That's right.
If you don't advertise them, then you have to
It costs
schedule
more
them
to-
and advertise them
Absolutely.
in advance. So
That's up to you guys.
it seems to me, advertise 2 a month and then decide whether we need them or not.
Yeah, the problem is, when we have them, then we end up having them.
Yeah,
So, I would think I would rather just pick an every other month kind of thing, and if we need it, fine, if we don't, we
We do
don't.
that too. I think initially in the beginning of the year, because of what's happening with EMS and fire, we're probably gonna need more than 1 meeting a
More
month.
than likely.
And so maybe for the first 6 months of the year, we schedule 2 meetings a month.
I think we should just schedule them 2 for the whole year and then cancel.
You wanna
I
just
I
do
don't
that?
have a
And
problem with
plan-
that either.
And plan further ahead and know what we're doing.
Okay,
And then if it tapers off and we don't need as many, we can cancel.
let's do that then.
Okay.
Okay,
Do we need to vote on that?
No.
We're gonna keep them at 7 o'clock, correct?
that
Yeah.
works for me best.
Okay.
Yeah,
Second and fourth Thursdays?
yep. I think the schedule sequence should be the same too.
Okay.
Consistency.
All right, action items, possible appointment of the planning commission letters of interest. I would like to put off the appointments until the new year at the organizational meeting, but I don't know how the board feels about that.
I agree with that.
Is there a reason we can't just do them now?
Well, I don't know, Chuck's not here tonight, of course, that's his fault, not ours, but
These are pretty routine, right?
I believe though at the planning commission meeting afterwards, Chip was here in attendance and we did talk about the ordinance that says 5 to 7 planning commission members. And I believe we need to discuss and perhaps get rid of the 5 to 7 and maybe pick 5 with 2 alternates.
Mr. Zachary Rice.
Yes, sir.
A few years ago, the township has a variable planning commission of 5 to 7 members, and something doesn't quite strike me as that's being wholesome. Do you have an opinion on that, a legal opinion?
I think the option that was just presented, of having a fixed number and then relying on alternates is probably the more preferred route. The MPC does, provide for procedures for alternates and when they get utilized and how they get utilized. I think rather than having a variable number, which is kind of hard to interpret, what does that really mean? You can sort of achieve the benefits of that by using the alternates in a way that's a lot clearer and easier to interpret.
Do we need to modify our ordinance to create that to happen? I'm assuming we do.
If the language that you're referencing is from an ordinance, then we would want to clean that up via an amendment to that ordinance through another ordinance.
Yeah, well, that doesn't have anything to do with appointing people tonight, but I think that needs to be clarified. And maybe that's something we ought to get adopted in the new year. If the board feels that
Are
way.
we're down 2 members right now? How many do we have currently?
5.
We have 5.
We have 5, okay. So we have no alternates. Are these alternates or, we don't have the alternate
I don't know whether they're
scenario?
willing to serve as alternates or not.
Okay.
But
So,
Or
these
do we
were
want to
reappointing-
establish a 7-member planning commission again?
These were reappointing existing members for an additional term, is that correct?
No.
These are
The-
new.
These are new.
These are new
Oh,
members.
Okay. Are any of the current 5 expiring?
I believe one is.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like maybe we'd need some more discussion then.
I just,
And if I may, generally with respect to planning commissions, similar to appointments to a municipal authority, how it works is it's basically that person, even though there are terms, that person stays in the position until a successor is appointed. So in other words, if somebody had a 5-year term and it just rolls over and the board of supervisors took no action to appoint a successor or a different person, that person would just stay in that position rather than creating a vacancy. Now, if that person didn't want to serve, they could obviously resign and then you'd have a vacancy that you would need to fill.
okay. So once somebody's appointed, if they choose to stay there, there's no more reappointment requirement, there's no term expiration, they just would continue to serve.
If you're satisfied with that person serving,
Okay.
I think it's probably cleaner to go ahead and actually even if it's a formality, make some kind of motion when that term is up to reappoint that person, just so that 10 years from down the road or whatever, if somebody's looking back, it's easier to track.
Right.
But the way that the MPC speaks to the appointment in terms of members is that they just automatically sort of roll over into a new term. It's not like, the Board of Supervisors are an elected position. It's just, there's an assumption of that person stays in that position. Again, if they don't want to serve, they can simply resign and then you'll have a vacancy that you'll have to fill.
But don't we normally appoint
We do appoint them at our
at our
organization meeting.
reorg meeting? I mean, that kind of makes sense. But,
Yeah, and that really helps. I think that kind of helps to keep track of who's what and where and how many years are left in the term. It's good practice to make those reappointments or re-ups, even if it is just really a formality.
okay.
Do we want to have a discussion about this at the new year?
With the reorg meeting, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
Anybody have a problem against it?
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's move on. LST collection agreement. Going to recommend that we just continue our contract with State College Borough to collect the LST tax.
And that's a 7-year contract, isn't it?
Yes.
Renewal.
Yeah, they do it for, I guess they do it for the entire center region.
They do it for Halfmoon Township.
But we're special.
Center Tax Agency collects the EIT for the county, the State College Borough collects the LST for the township.
Yep.
Price-wise, nothing's changed really, right?
No,
Okay.
They do a good job. I haven't heard
They
any
do,
complaints.
Do we need to?
I guess we need
we
to
do because it is.
vote on the agreement.
Yeah.
Do I hear a motion to continue the agreement for
I'll
another
make the
7 years?
motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Next up, possible appointment of Karen Miller as a Half Moon Township representative to CNET.
Well,
What do you think?
I said that I would do it for a year and see how it goes.
Okay.
do we want, again, we're appointing
Person
committees.
for a
and
one-year-
Appointments are, do we do that at the reorg meeting? Do we do it now or at the reorg meeting?
I don't know. I don't know when CNET's next,
I think Cindy wanted to know as soon as possible. Their
Yeah,
first
she's
meeting's
in the meeting.
January 10th. And this is for a board of directors for something outside of the township, so.
I mean, I don't care, I'm just asking.
I'm fine. If you're willing to do it and try it for a year, we'll appoint you for a year.
Okay. I am, yes.
Okay. All right, then I move that we approve Karen Miller as our CNET representative for the year 2023. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. You're in. Do us proud.
Thank you,
You sure you
Karen.
still, you sure you wanna do this?
I don't know, that's why I only committed to a year.
They seem really nice.
It's a quarterly thing, so.
Yes.
It's,
Board of Directors term to be determined by board 1 to 3 years. That's part of C. Resolution 2022-32, adopting the amendment to the Center Region Council of Governments COG Office Product Intermunicipal Agreement 2001.
what is it?
2001-1. This,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, this is just a resolution about turning the building over to the COG people.
Zach
So-
recommended we do it by resolution.
We wash our hands of it. Do I hear a-
Move that we approve resolution 2022-32.
I'll second it. Do we have any question or discussion by the board? Or any questions of Zach?
Is this the agreement to turn is it 2028? Turn the building over to COG?
Zach, can you give us the details on that?
Yes.
Yeah, so I believe all that this resolution is doing is simply implementing and sort of effectuating the deed conveyance to COG for the building that as it was already sort of expressed and laid out and contemplated in the underlying lease agreement that the COG had entered into, when was that, 2001? Whatever the initial agreement the agreement was. This is a resolution. I believe they're looking for a resolution from each of the contributing or member municipalities authorizing the deed conveyance be implemented as it was laid out in that original agreement.
I will always have a problem with this plan, or this agreement. That is, I do not understand, we are the component municipalities that make up COG. And then we have an entity called COG who performs the services on our behalf, which we pay for. We pay for the building belongs to us, but we're conveying it to an entity that is really us. So I have a serious problem with why, and I've always had this problem. I've gone to the general forum, I've gone to the discussions, And I still have a problem with why we are giving up control of a building that belongs to the municipalities. And I don't understand why this is so important, why it's pursued so vigorously. And so that bothers me about
And
this.
it's due by
particular-
2028, I guess.
Well, even if it's 2028 or it doesn't matter what year it is, to me, it's hard to separate a COG organization, a service that is basically instituted by the municipalities to serve the municipalities. It's really not. It's not a government entity. It's not elective government. It's like an independent agency that we are taking. We're taking our ownership of building, and we're going to own part of the building, and the other municipalities also own part of the building. So it's collectively owned by the municipalities, and we're going to give that up to this entity called COG, and I really don't understand the long-term purpose of it.
Ron, we don't really own it. The townships can't own it. We lent the money for the building. And the lease never stated at the end of the lease what happens to the building. So if it doesn't go to COG, who owns the land, what happens to the building then? Municipalities individually can't own it. We'd have to form some other entity to manage the building. We already have that entity, which is COG.
Well, who's leasing the building right now?
COG.
And who are they leasing it from?
They're paying back to the municipalities the money that was lent to them.
Right, they're leasing the building.
Well, they're
We
paying
were
off
their
their
bank.
loan. They're paying off, we were the bank.
We paid for the building. And when you pay, in my mind, when you pay for something, it's yours.
Right.
So we're the leaser, and they are the leasee.
This was in the November 28th COG General Forum.
I understand.
It was passed by unanimous unit vote.
To forward it to the municipalities for their approval.
I don't know if it was for the approval, but just, I'm not sure where resolution, how this all ties back, but we already agreed that that's what we were gonna do. So, that's,
Then there's no reason
it's a
to vote.
formality. It's a formality to
So
get
we're voting
each-
on a formality.
I believe that's what, and we
I
have
don't
to
look at it
sign.
that way myself.
Maybe we can get something out of our legal counsel here. Zach, can you clarify the dog chasing and eating its own tail kind of thing here?
Well, and so I actually don't know if I have a copy of the original. I'm trying to find, it would be the 2001-1 intermunicipal agreement, and perhaps I can work with Amy to get a copy of that. But my understanding of what they're seeking here is that they're seeking each of the municipalities to authorize, for their portion, it's sort of jointly owned at this point, to authorize that on completion on the COG's completion of their payments under the lease agreement, that the deed would be conveyed to COG. So it would go from being sort of jointly owned by the authority, by the townships, the municipalities, sort of joint and severally, and deeded over to the COG, to the body that is the COG.
Which is the municipalities.
As far as the policy of why that is the way that they're seeking to do, I can't speak to necessarily to that. So if that's something you'd like me to look into further, I don't know if there's, Amy may be able to speak to this, I don't know if there's a timing constraint here, or if it's something they're just asking the municipality to take action on at some point in the near future. Perhaps something we could table, and we can evaluate it further and try to answer some of these questions.
I received an email from, with a general forum follow-up after that meeting. And we were asked to, check with our solicitors to find out whether we needed to address this by either resolution or ordinance. And Zach had looked into it and requested that we do this by resolution.
Mhm.
So that's why we're here, because we were asked to check with our solicitors to find out whether we needed to take any further action by ordinance or resolution.
And we are to vote on the authorization to transfer our ownership from the municipalities to this entity called COG. Now, the only, I don't know what that means in terms of future use of the building or future decisions of the building. Does it mean that the municipalities, if they want to do anything else with the building, like sell it? Because now they own the land, now they own the building. So if they make a decision to sell it, is that something the municipalities have to approve? Or is it now something that they can just do whenever they want to do it?
Everything through COG, Ron, goes through the municipalities. Budget, selling, anything would have to be approved by the municipalities in the general forum.
And it says that as part of this,
That's just the way COG operates. That's the
well,
general
but is
COG.
it part of the amendment to the Center Region Council of Governments Office Project Intermunicipal Agreement 2001-1? Is it or is it not a stipulated requirement that they get approval from all the municipalities to do anything other than use the building as they're currently using it? I'm sure they can renovate it, they can, they move things around in the building. That's part of an organizational operation. My question is, let's say they just want to sell the building and the land and then go build another building somewhere. Or get another building somewhere.
That would be all the municipalities that are COG would make those decisions, just like when they when they want to buy office furniture, it has to go to the general forum. When they buy vehicles, when they do anything, buying or selling, it comes through the general forum.
Would that be, Patty, would that be by unanimous consent if the building was to be sold or rented out to some other entity? From all the member municipalities? And if you don't know the answer to
I'm
that,
not.
I know
That's
you're
the
not.
crux of my concern.
Well,
I guess
it depends on, there's certain things at COG, there's a few things that require the unanimous, depending on contracts, like the parks and things. But it still requires, whether it's unanimous in individual votes or unanimous across municipalities, that sometimes varies depending on what we're talking about.
So the answer is maybe, depending on what the contract says.
And we're supposed to vote tonight to approve this resolution, which in effect transfers the ownership of the building to the member municipalities to the COG. Is that correct?
Once the lease expires.
Once the lease expires.
And the COG is the member municipalities.
We're going from ourselves to ourselves.
This is the problem that I have.
So we still have
Understanding the
control.
legal entities and the legal ownerships. And I don't want, what I'm getting at is I don't want to give up control of something that we should not give up control of.
Ron, and we have such a very small percentage of this. The other municipalities have much more percent, and it was
I think
all,
we own the
and they
window.
all unanimously
Confident?
agreed. Like, we have like
We
3
can
or
make
4%.
a joke out of it, but we have partial ownership of this building.
About
We do.
3%.
We are a founding member of COG. And,
And not
that's why,
necessarily happy
even
all
though
the time, but we
have
are
a
a
small
member.
percentage, but we're still a member.
Yep.
Okay. I've spoken my piece, I'll
All
yield
right.
back.
Well, I guess I'll call for the question unless anybody has anything else to add.
Can I
Call-
just ask a stupid question?
You can ask any question you'd like.
What building are we talking about?
The building that the Center Region Council of Governments offices now reside in
Cato.
in State College in Cato Park.
Okay.
Is that Cato Park?
Yeah, I think it's Cato Park.
Mhm.
All right, call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
I voted aye at the forum meeting.
Okay, so are you eyeing for it or eyeing against it?
Might as well end this thing. Aye. for it.
Okay, voting for it. All
It
right,
can be done.
3-1. Done. All right, supervisors' reports. Anybody have anything to report? Start with Patty.
No, nothing to report.
Roseanne?
No, I made my report when we spoke about the planning commission.
Okay. Ron?
No.
I don't have anything to add either. So anything for the good and welfare? Anyone? Diversity, equity, inclusion. Don't know if Ms. Squire is still on the target or not. Not seeing any hands up.
I am, and I think Sharon did a great job last week of presenting all of the information that was coming up about the United Nations rights of human beings. And so I think we'll wait until next month and add some more things. If I may say, well, never mind, I'll do that later. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
A motion to adjourn, do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks for coming.